The organizers were just me and my secretary. The idea originated when the Semiotic Association in Paris was founded. There was actually a second meeting in Warsaw, but it was soon after the invasion of Czechoslovakia. There was the meeting in Paris with Jacobson, Benveniste, Greimas. I think I'm only one. No, Krsteva and I are the only ones still alive among the participants of that meeting. And there the idea that a conference ought to be done came up. Then there was a last meeting in Parma, because the publisher Franco Maria Ricci wanted to invite everyone. The last elections were held. Cesare Segri was elected president and I was elected as secretary. I had no desire to do it at all, but Jacobson insisted and said, "Go to the Congress." Well, this meeting the thing in Warsaw was in 1968, and then the meeting was in 1971 and 1972. And we started looking for money for the Congress, but we were soon disappointed. It was supposed to be an organization from Genoa, but later Genoa didn't do it, and so on. Finally, the Gemelli Institute of Milan provided some funding. They gave us the whole, and there was some small private support. But it wasn't much. We had 20 million at that time to pay everything. 20 million were nothing. 20 million lira, around 10,000 euros. Just to pay for a journey from America required at least 1 million. We had to refund Jacobson, Sibiak, all these people. Finally, we got it done. The only thing is, we didn't expect all those people to come. We expected about 200, 300 registrations. 800, 900 persons arrived. And very important people, whom I hadn't invited. Lacan, for example. We didn't think about inviting Lacan because he wasn't exactly a semiotician. And the day before the opening, we had a party in my home where we met people we believed had died 20 years ago. Buissons, David Efron, the one who studied gestuality. We had written to them, and they came. And so there were all of them, all. I remember that my secretary was staring at them because she said, "It's been 2 years that I have been reading their names. Just the names. Now I can see them here and discover that they are real, that they really exist." The event had been well organized, so that after the opening session, various separate sessions started. At some point, I found myself sitting on the steps of stairs, having nothing to do because everybody was in the right place. Every session had its own director. I realized that everything was fine. First, we actually had to figure out in what sense people were interested in semiotics. Paul Watzlawick, from the Palo Alto School, arrived there. He came there, and at that point we realized that also that kind of research could have a semiotic side. If you look indeed at the Congress proceedings, there are different sections, and it became clear that semiotics is not a discipline, something I had always claimed, and still claim now, even more, although many of my colleagues disagree. I think semiotics should have become a university organization, a faculty, rather than a discipline. Let's think, for instance, about medicine. What do dietetics and oncology, physiology and gastroenterology have in common? They are techniques and have one thing in common: the health of human body. Not only that, between different sections, between an oncologist and a dentist, there is an ABs. But also within the same specialization, there are different schools. I wrote this also in the preface of Semiotics and the Philosophy of Language. There is a general semiotics which for me, not for many others, is still a philosophical discipline concerning the foundation of semiosis, of the sign. Well, I'm linked to Peirce. And then there are specific semiotics which can also be very different amongst each other. Although at the beginning, during the structuralist phase, we thought we could find general categories which could work, looking for articulations, not just in language but also in cinema. We also acted naively, such as precisely when we thought we could find general categories. And this is not the case, because the more semiotics distributes itself to different sectors, the more it discovers universes with their own rules. To dominate all these specializations, there should be what I call general semiotics. That is exactly the one I practiced myself, in the sense that, yes, at the beginning I dealt with cinema, visual arts, but then I let other people do it, specialized people, so that they could specialize in those things. I limited myself, especially in the last works, to general theoretical problems. Nowadays, in my opinion, there are few people who are studying general theory and several who practice, for instance, sociosemiotics, etc., which is good. But if we look at the program of the Semiotics Congress in Berkeley in 1994, there were even some disciplines which studied such incredible topics as the afterlife. In that, I think, we had gone a bit overboard, but what I still believe is that what analytic philosophers call the linguistic turn of our time has actually been a semiotic turn. All disciplines, not just humanities, but also genetics, the genetic code, DNA, etc., significantly oriented themselves towards the semiotic problem. So that a conference took place in Lucca in 1981-1982, where we had immunologists themselves willing to meet the semioticians in order to find points in common. A problem indeed occurred there, where they thought they could see semiosis. I could only just see a stimulus-response. Yes, it was, but there were other phenomena afterwards. While in Italy and in Germany, semiotics continued to develop. The French, at some point, driven by reciprocal envy, began to say, "I'm not doing semiotics anymore. I'm doing psychoanalysis," as Kristeva used to say. Tsvetan Todorov has done history of culture and other wonderful stuff. And thus, what took, so to speak, the leadership of semiotics was the Greimassian school. And that's it, at least in Paris. Then, if you look at a peripheral university, you might come to know that there are people doing semiotics who are not necessarily Gramscian, but those who claim that there is one scientific semiotics are the Gramscians. In the United States, there has been, so to speak, a clash with analytic philosophy, which in itself could well be understood as an interesting form of semiotics, especially if we look at its critics like Rorty. We have done many conferences together, but in America, they're magic words. Semiotics didn't sell well. Later, some universities like Brown started a PhD program in semiotics. But at that point, cultural studies had become fashionable. Remember that someone doing sociosemiotics is doing cultural studies. But they changed the name of the PhD program and they called semiotics cultural studies. There are shibboleths working there, passwords, so to speak, marketing words, and therefore America is a special case. But South America always kept going. Brazilians in particular were considerably involved. Brazilians were working on Peirce before the whole semiotic issue in Europe started. They were all Noigandres poets. Haroldo de Campos, Augusto de Campos, Decio Pignatari were studying Peirce in the 50s. Obviously, they were wrong because they used to study Max Ben's books, who never understood Peirce. But alas, we shouldn't throw away tradition. There are some among my friends who have begun to say, let's not throw away Saussure. Let's not throw away those from whom we started. For a while, semiotics seemed to be all structuralist. And it was like structuralism and semiotics were the same thing, and it was not true. At the same point, structuralism was thrown out of the window, but we were not meant to get rid of everything. Innovation. Let's try to understand it. In the hard sciences, there is a huge sense of continuity. I say something only basing myself on what the previous scientist said, and I expand, prove, disprove, etc. Analytic philosophy has tried to reproduce this attitude of the hard sciences. We have a very precise corpus. Everything produces a small article starting from a previous article by someone else. Typically in the humanities there is the myth of novelty at all costs. The French are the masters in this sense. I can be noticed only if I say the contrary of what has been said before. If that's what we mean by innovation, then the method is detrimental, to the point that it reverses the meaning of words. So that, for example, we can have Baudrillard calling seduction what for other people is not seduction. An attempt to always be, as Maritain used to say, le chevalier de l'absolu. That's why I was talking about innovation and tradition. We don't have to always pretend to say the contrary. Maybe it's also a Hegelian vice. We negate what has been previously said in order to go forward. Part of my group tried to merge semiotics and cognitive sciences in the 1990s and 2000s. And so, at the University of San Marino, founded by us, we have done about 20 very interesting conferences. They were attended by all the major scholars of cognitive sciences, and good relationships have developed. I think that while early semiotics was still the victim of a dogma affecting all philosophy, we can't talk about mind. So, either we talk about behavior or about so and so. With cognitive sciences, we realize that we need to talk also about mind. I always insist on recalling something. Adriano Olivetti, who was a great man, employed engineers in his company when necessary because he needed them. However, if possible, he also employed people who majored in Greek philology or philosophy, and then he would send them to the factory for 6 months in order to see what happened. But he knew that someone who had studied humanities had a mind more open to innovation. I have always been of the idea, and I've always said that after turning 50, one has to focus only on Elizabethan poets, whom one knows how to study. One should let young people deal with novelties instead. It's not that I have actually studied Elizabethan poets, but I have partially diverted to historical studies. I don't know if you've seen the large volume on the history of medieval thought, and now I am collecting all my semiotic writings. The outcome will be around 3,000 pages. Now they're all in the hands of someone who is only putting together a single bibliography, without modifying the texts, just unifying and editing them. The result will be a 2-volume set. Some sort of funeral offering to be placed in the pyramid for the dying pharaoh. And then, you know, I have had a strange life, interrupted in the middle, as if I had died at 50 years old. But after continuing like this, and what happened in the middle of my life, I started writing novels. Therefore, that's a parallel life. Well, a more amusing one. Now there is a new novel. It's already written. It's a grotesque representation of journalism. It's the story of a newspaper which might seem a bit Berlusconian, even though the story occurred in 1992, before Berlusconi entered politics. The results of a Congress can only emerge later. When we prepared the Congress in 1974, we didn't expect there to be the high level of participation that there actually was. Perhaps it would have taken only a small mistake in communicating it, and only 100 people would have come, and nobody would have ever talked about semiotics anymore. The result of a Congress is not a final dogmatic document. A Congress generates proceedings, and there you can find what is available. It all depends on the productivity and novelty of the proceedings. What would I wish for the participants? Preserve paper. Preserve paper. Do not only study online, because a big blackout will occur, everything will disappear, and only your books will last forever.